Hello and welcome, everybody. You're all welcome to Bialtana Living Earth Festival, where we celebrate biodiversity and our natural heritage. And we're reminded that we need the earth to sustain us. And in turn, then, we must look after the earth. And the earth is under pressure, and those we share the earth with are under pressure in a lot of places. I just been told you can't see me. I'm not sure if that's any better. I'm sure you can see me though. So you're all very welcome, and we're delighted to have won the Education Awards last night for Best Education Outreach, and we'll probably be putting that up in front of you for a few days to come until the thrill wears off. So today's show, we have a visit. We're going to go shortly to visit our virtual visit to Carrick and Suir yesterday. We had Una Fitzpatrick of the National Biodiversity Data Centre, who coordinates the National Pollinator Plan, and we were looking at what we can do and what is being done to save our bees and other pollinators, and there was some very good practical advice yesterday. The previous day we were on the Copper Coast. I may have my dates wrong, but I think the previous day we were in the Copper Coast. We've been around everywhere in the southeast, and we had the wonderful coastline that we have in the southeast, and we visited that. And today we're going to visit the pastoral riparian beauty of the Suir Valley. And before that, we want to look at our picture challenge for yesterday. We gave you the challenge of producing images for on pollinators and our flowers, and we got back flowers and pollinators in a lot of cases. So this one is from Anne Nolan in Tramore, beautiful one of not just a butterfly, but there behind you see a bee, and they're all happily gorging themselves. Lovely picture. And Anne sent us in a few pictures. Let me see, I bring up the next one. And there is another one of a sunflower. I can name that plant anyway. And Anne also sent us this really amazing picture of a bee. Look at him or her tucked in there happily and looking out at the world. And that's a lovely picture. Thank you very much, Anne. We also have
Those aren't changed. Those aren't changing there.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. That's so we've seen this one, and now we will see that I've already painted such a wonderful picture in your mind of these, so you hardly need to see them, but actually you do, of course. That's a lovely picture of on a sunflower, and also from and this wonderful one of, look, the bee poking out, and look, delightful picture. We also received pictures from William Tracy, and that is here. Bring it up there. Another lovely picture, and we had entries from PJ Craig, and this one here is very unusual. I think PJ is using some technical trickery here, and that is a stunning picture, though, absolutely stunning picture. And PJ also sent us another picture, and this he entitles table for two, and a wonderful picture of two bees eating out, probably on a date. So thank you very much, PJ. And the winner of our competition is indeed PJ for that final photograph. And we'll give you details of tomorrow's competition later on at the end of the show. So we have, of course, tomorrow coming is the International Biodiversity Day, formerly known as the International Day for Biological Diversity. It's run by the UN, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and we're delighted once again to be part of that festival. And that's on tomorrow. So not only will we be featuring it, but remember, all day it's International Biodiversity Day. So now we are coming to our visit, and we're going to visit the Suir River at Carrick on Suir. A beautiful stretch of countryside, although I imagine most of us just see it, glimpses of it when we're driving up to Carrick and Clonmel, and but in fact you need to make time to park up, get out of your car and walk along the river, because there's a beautiful walkway along the river, and Brian is going to introduce us to that Blueway, and also to talk about all the things that can be seen regularly or infrequently along that way. And I'll pass you over to Brian now to take over the controls and bring us to the Carrick on Suir.
Can you hear me now?
That's it, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
You look good.
Apologies for that. Very good. So hello everybody, and delighted that you're here to listen to a bit of what I have to say about the Suir, the river that I was born beside and the river that I live beside, and very much part of me and very much part of the people of this town. And to tell you just a little bit about the Blueway to start with. Let's go to the next. Yes. If you take a look at Carrick from the river, and remember that all our first visitors to Carrick came up the river, it was the first major thoroughfare in through the County Tipperary. And people have been using the river for centuries and centuries to move goods in and out of the county. It's known that at Tassel Abbey in Golden, near Cashel, that the stone for that came from Bristol, and that stone had to be ferried up through the river, pulled by boats. The tide would bring it as far as Carrick, and after that it had to be pulled practically by hand and by horses all the way to Golden. But in the 1730s, there was a petition to put in a towpath so that the barges could be towed by horses and to be much quicker and much more economical. So we have this path along the riverbank from Carrick on Suir to Clonmel, a total distance of 13 miles, that was designed for where boats were towed by a team of 12 horses. And of course, that sort of canal type barge traffic disappeared with the advent of the railways in the 1840s, and it fell into total disrepair. But the council have repaired the walk up to cycleway standards, so you can walk or cycle from Carrick on Suir along the riverbank to Clonmel, 13 miles away. So in addition to that towpath walk or cycle, they have put facilities in at Carrick, Finnan, Clonmel, Kilsheelan and Carrick to receive kayaks. So the people who wish to canoe or kayak down the river can do so. And it has opened up the this beautiful stretch of the River Suir in the valley of the Suir, the views of the Comras and Slievanaman, it has opened up to a lot more visitors. Some people will say that the pristine wildness of it has changed forever, but then the whole area has been opened up for so much more access. So someone say, where's the Blueway start? Well, the boats were towed up the river, so I would say the Blueway starts in Carrick and Suir, and I'm just going to focus on some of the wildlife that is present here in Carrick and Suir at the head of the tide of the River Suir. When I say at the head of the tide, it's not just one spot, but it's a stretch of water. If you're in Care or Clonmel, the river only flows in one direction. It flows down and out towards the sea. When you're in Waterford and Carrick and Suir, the river flows in two directions. The tides change twice daily, and you'll have the water gushing in one way and flowing the other. So, but at Carrick, it's the head of the tide, and just below the castle, the water is muddy. It's brackish. It's discolored because of the incoming and outcoming tide turning up the sand from the muddy bottom at all times. And in this stretch below the castle, we have a few species of fish that come to spawn in this particular area. One is the smelt or cucumber fish, and the other major one in this area is the flounder. They love the muddy bottom and the dark water. The flounder is a hugely important fish in the ecosystem of the river, and it's mainly nocturnal, and it comes and spawns, and then the planktonic fry drift off down the current and stay in the lower estuary and even out to sea before the adult fish come back into the river. So that's just below the castle, and at this stage, the water will change in depth hugely twice daily, but the water is
and maybe then if the high is too much, you might get a knife that you take off.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. So in this area, there's certain types of birds that you won't find further upriver. The egret is pretty common and found in most areas now, but it loves this stretch of mudflats just below the castle in Carrick. Throughout the winter, we'll have a number of red shank, greylag geese, and there's quite a flock there in the last year or two, and they've been joined by a white domestic goose as well. So the domestic goose derives from the greylags, and the marshes downriver Carrick were always a great place for the greylag. And one of my favorites, these little ones are very shy, they're the green sandpiper, and you'll find them moving between the fresh water and the brackish water. They're just a lovely bird to see on the shore. As we're moving on then into town, you have tidal waters that are clear. It's not so much the brown tide coming back up, but the height, the river water, the fresh water backs up into the town. And the bed of the river, the limestone river that the Suir is different here. It's more shingly, hard, small stones. And this is the spawning ground of a fish called the Twait shad. And the Twait shad is in decline all over. And at the moment, I think they're only found at 3 or 4 spots in Ireland, one of them being St. Mullins, which is the head of the tide on the Barrow, and the other here at Carrick on Suir. They're being fished. There's no restriction on fishing for them. And certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, a few fish have been caught. Now this would drastically different from when I was a young boy fishing, when you could catch a dozen or half a dozen Twait shad without any difficulty. You didn't even have any special gear. You could make your own hooks with spoons, and they were so plentiful that they were just unbelievable. They're a herring type fish, and they were so plentiful it was unreal. And then for them to disappear almost altogether and now to be making a slow comeback. But the Thwaite shad spawns just above the weir, above the old bridge in Carrick and Suir, and it's one of those fish that you won't see in many more places throughout the country. The Thwaite shad spends about 2 years in the river before going back to sea, where it spends 3 to 7 years growing to adulthood and then coming back to spawn again. So a very important fish. There are other fish then that use the river for transport and to get to spawning grounds, and you'll be familiar with the Atlantic salmon, the eel, and as in this photograph, perhaps you may not have seen a sea lamprey before, but they all pass through Carrick to go further up to spawning grounds. We know how difficult and precarious the position is in relation to salmon, but a lot of people locally wouldn't know that the eels are critically endangered. And the eels were the favoured food for heron and for otter. A huge decline in eel numbers. Very difficult now to see any adult eel. You'll find some small ones if you filter through some of the mud and weed on the riverbed. But again, an unbelievable change from my childhood when you could see the run of elvers, the baby eels, perhaps a foot wide and 4 foot deep on the river and arriving in their literal millions. You just don't see those sights anymore. So a change in face in terms of the fish that are migrating in the river. And that has changed the landscape of the other predators as well. This sea lamprey was on its way to spawn further up the shore. Some of them spawn at the weir in Clonmel, some try to get past it. They're a very ancient beast with a sucker-like mouth. And this particular lamprey is in the region of 3 feet, I would say, in length, and certainly a huge fish. After spawning, they die, and we'd often see their carcass floating back down the river, but this one didn't get to the spawning grounds, and the opportunist that the heron is had a tasty meal. So I want to talk a bit about invasive species in the river. And if you can see this here, it's a shoal of small dace fry. Now, dace is a coarse fish, inadvertently introduced to the Munster Blackwater over 100 years ago. And a well-known incident when a UK fisherman come to fish for pike and salmon brought some dace with him for bait. And when he finished his day fishing, he tossed his remaining bait into the Blackwater, and they thrived there, but they remained only in the Blackwater for the best part of 100 years. And a little over 20 years ago, they appeared at St. Mullins. Again, I can only suppose that somebody fishing for pike or some coarse fish like that at St. Mullins brought some dace with them from another jurisdiction, and they got introduced on the Barrow, and they spread rapidly up the Barrow. And they appeared in the Suir about 12 to 15 years ago now, and they have spread really rapidly. Sometimes when you look from the bridges, you can see a dark cloud of fish on the riverbank. And the dace breeds really successfully because the fry hatch earlier than trout. They compete with the trout for their feeding grounds. And as I say, it certainly has changed the face of the whole river in Carrick, and will change the face of the Suir as they move progressively upstream and increase in size. Here's just an adult dace, and most of the specimen dace for Ireland have been caught in the Suir at Carrick in the past 5 or 6 years. They're a coarse fish, they're scaly, and because they're introduced, we're not certain as to who entirely feeds on them, but from our observances, we can see that the kingfisher is thriving at the moment in Carrick, because there's these huge shoal of small fry very close to the river's edge, and definitely the kingfishers have got the knack. And as if you're aware, with kingfishers, they dive in and catch their fish, and then they'll turn it around and swallow it head first, so that the scales don't stick in its throat. So it's lovely if you can stay hidden while you observe a kingfisher fishing, because it's just a wonderful sight. As the dace get bigger, they're predated on by top predators like the cormorants, and I have seen flocks of cormorants, 13, 40 strong, fishing at Carrick. But when you can see them lift a fish like that, they'll certainly do well. Cormorants take a lot of other trout, and you see them with eels as well. They're just super fishermen, or fisher women, whatever you want to say. Right. So they're just some of the changes in terms of the fishing in the river. Other invasive species on the riverbank, and I'm sure you've come across this beauty before, the Japanese knotweed. And when it's on private land and where there was old fishermen rights away and towpaths, it's not always clear as to who has responsibility to do anything about it. This was a particular stand on private land in Carrick Beg that the group I'm involved in, the Carrick and Suir Lions Club, took it on ourselves to try and do something in terms of the spread of invasive species. And we got a contractor sprayer to deal with this, because it was right on the riverbank, and you couldn't see the river. You couldn't, all the traditional native flowers that were there were being overrun. And as I said, it took quite an effort. That's exactly the same spot where that bed of Japanese knotweed was. And like, apart from opening up the river and giving light to the vegetation there, it also opened up some of the artifacts of the former boating importance of the town. And this is what we want to see on the riverbank: the purple loosestrife, the meadow sweet, and the yellow fleabane. And this is what you typically find on a limestone river. And this is what's disappearing for us, not just with the Japanese knotweed, but also with the Himalayan balsam, that lovely policeman's helmet that's very attracted to the bees. And I've noticed in particular a decline in the fleabane. And I just think that the bees are going for the more attractive Himalayan balsam beside them. So they're all having an impact. But when you knock them back, the natural flowers come to the fore again. This is the lovely marsh marigold in bloom at the moment, and the Lus Bui Bioltana. And I would, if there was ever a flower for the Bioltana festival, I think it would have to be the Lus Bui. Absolutely beautiful. There are other invasives on the riverbank. Here's my bike beside a Japanese knotweed. No, sorry, a giant hogweed. And the difficulty here is the north side of the river shore, because it's accessible, we can get at the plants like this. And groups like, there's a group in Clonmel, a group in Kilsheelan, and they'll take the seeds away. Our group will look for the smaller, younger plants and try and dig out the root. One of the issues in terms of Carrick is that if you throw something in the river upstream, it flows down and it may meet the incoming tide at Carrick and get deposited at Carrick. So we have to be vigilant all the time for invasive species. They can come upriver or downriver. And another one that is impacted on some of our wetland or remaining bog areas is the cuckoo flower. A beautiful flower itself, but it's going to outcompete the stands of yellow flag iris and all that vegetation that we have in our wetland areas. So we just have to be vigilant, and we have to look for these things. And there's no point in waiting for somebody else to come along and solve all these problems. Local community groups have to get involved themselves and do what they can within the law. We make no secret of the fact that we think Carrick and Suir is the best place in Europe to watch European otters at the moment. And the Lions Club have set up a community, a Facebook community, Wild About Carrick. And some of the images that our amateur photographers have put up for us, including this one, really shows how close up and personal you can get with the otters at Carrick. They're just fascinating, absolutely fascinating animals. And they're mainly nocturnal, but the conditions in Carrick are such that with the tide coming twice daily and at different hours, they will often come out on the incoming tide because fish move with the tide. And particularly when the otters are feeding the young, they'll want to be out and about, and people can get quite close and great photographs. So the otter, even though he's plentiful at the moment and a great place to see them, we can see that their food source is being diminished. We know that the eels are critically endangered. We know that the trout are disappearing, the salmon, more scarce than they ever were. And in recent times, we've had a plague for the crayfish, and this has impacted on them also. So the otters, their main diet in Carrick at the moment is on the flounder. And without the flounder, they'd be in serious trouble because, as I said, all the other species are disappearing. And it's obvious to us who know the rivers well that the size of the flounder is diminishing. You rarely, if ever, now see a flounder of a ½ pound, pound, or 2 pound weight. The flounder, or the fluke as they're called locally, that the otters are coming up with are much smaller fish altogether. We've yet to see the otter eat the dace, but we know that they do in the UK and elsewhere. So perhaps at the end of the day, the dace will prove worthwhile for some reason or other. We love the trout on brack. Brack means speckled, and you can certainly see the speckles on that beauty. 28% of the trout in the River Suir come from the catchments in the Narra Valley. And so it's important that whatever work is done at Carrick level is also looked at upriver. And there's enough agencies looking at that, but nothing like the fish that was there in times gone by. This is a poor picture of the flounder, but a lot of people are surprised that what they would imagine is a flatfish and a sea fish will be found so far inland. But as I said, this fish is becoming critically important now in the whole food chain of the river. This is the unfortunate white-clawed crayfish that was wiped out from Clonmel downwards about 3 years ago by the introduction of a crayfish plague. Now, Ireland was the best place in Europe. We had maintained a native crayfish population. The problem with the plague was with an imported signal crayfish that came from the US of A. It brought a plague with it, and it wipes out the crayfish wherever it went. And unfortunately, whether it was from fishing or from a kayaking event on the Blueway, the plague got into the river, and of course it spread downriver first, and over the space of a few weeks wiped out the entire population of crayfish. Now, the likes of the otter and the heron in Carrick have had plenty of choice in terms of food, but in the upper stretches of the Suir, the crayfish in some instances would be 80–90% of the diet of the otter. So it's significant impact upriver. And once the plague gets into the catchment, it will go the entire way through the catchment. So I'll never see this creature or stand on one again in Carrick. And the weekend that we found all the corpses, I was in a kayak and counted over 100 between the two bridges in Carrick. So they were far more common than we thought, and they played their role in the whole ecostructure as well. And all this all this notification and action just all came too late, unfortunately. So it's just an example of how something can be wiped out because of something new being brought into the environment. But you know, there's a lot of other issues at play. When I look at Carrick, when we were growing up, kids fishing from the bridge, I mentioned already that anybody could catch a half dozen or a dozen of the Twade shad. You'd certainly have a bad day fishing if you didn't go home with 2 or 3 trout, and you'd be very lucky if you didn't catch an eel or two when you're fishing. When the fishing season starts here now on the 17th of March, there's a rush of enthusiasm for all the young boys in town out of their fishing rods. And but you see very few, very little being caught, and what is being caught is very small. For centuries, the Carrick men fished in their traditional fishing cots in the snap net method. And even 30 years ago, there was a 20, 30 licensed crews, and crew would be 2 boats of 4 men fishing the shore, and all that is gone. And the traditions like poling a cot up through the current, and that's a very fast current there, all those traditions are disappearing from the locality. So it's sad on many fronts. But along the Blueway is still a beautiful place to experience nature and see everything that it has. At this moment in time, when the chicks are out and about, and the drake can sometimes run a clutch of 16 across the river, is fantastic to see. And in another few weeks, these cygnets will be moved from the pond onto the river. And each year, it's lovely to watch the swan. And about Carrick is a very difficult place for nests because of the impact of the tide and because of the impact of floods. So there are some ponds near the river that they go to, they'll hatch out there, and after about 6 weeks, they'll bring the chicks onto the riverbank. And it's always an exciting time to see the new clutch of swans as such. So, but they have their predators too. And our American mink, who's a very, very intelligent animal, he'll take eggs, chicks, fish, almost anything. He appears regularly in Carrick, and it's unusual because the one good thing about Carrick is the population of otters will deter the mink from getting established in Carrick, but they still visit. And when some of our goslings and our cygnets go missing, it's usually the mink is blamed. But this guy walked up to a group of 6 people and made them get off the path, and they're quite fearless. And but when you look at the mink and otter on a regular basis, they're very, very different creatures altogether. The otter is much shyer, and so I just hope that this guy won't get too established. He certainly has been recorded on at least 8 different locations on the Blueway between Carrick and Suir and Clonmel. Okay. When you get through the town and the tidal stretch, and if you're familiar with the former Moloko factory or the Corman factory as it is now, there's a weir on the river. It was for catching salmon. It was erected by Lord Waterford and later leased by the Davin family, who ran the towpath service, the barges on the river. The barges were called yawls. So the ships come into Waterford, unloaded onto big barges called lighters, because it lightened the load. The lighters came as far as Carrick with the tide. The goods were transferred from the lighters onto yawls, and the yawls then were pulled by the 12 horses up the towpath to Clonmel, and there were some stops in between. But when you get to that break in the river where this weir is, where the factory is, there's no more influence from the tide. There's no more rise and fall, and the species and the birds and insects, everything changes. From here and about a mile west of Carrick and Suir to Clonmel, there's no more influence of the tide. It's just a fast-flowing river Suir. The Suir is the third largest river in Ireland, or so they say. It's 115 miles long, but the Suir has twice the flow of the Barrow. So I'm not sure, should you make a river, don't rate it on its length alone. The flow is an important thing as well. But there is a flora from here to Clonmel that's absolutely beautiful. This is the flowering rush, and from July onwards, these will be in bloom, and they attract, like the small tortoiseshell here, they'll attract their own range of butterflies. I mentioned the purple loosestrife briefly earlier. Absolutely fabulous, blooming till late, almost into autumn, and attracts a huge amount of butterflies and bees. It's a great plant for bees in particular, and it has special mechanisms. It has almost 5 different ways of blooming, and different flowers, different times come out to have longevity in terms of attracting the bees. And even though we love the loosestrife, it was brought abroad to the Americas and the Australias, and it is a huge invasive species there because they have none of the insects that feed on it. And this is the danger of introducing plants from one area to another. Here, the loosestrife has at least 5 insects, snails, moths, larvae that feed on it, that keep it in check. So we all depend on each other. The amount of loosestrife it's maintained by the creatures for lower down the food chain, that keep it in check. So it is one of my favorite plants as well, and it attracts the red admiral and lots of other butterflies. It's not all bad news. I mean, we've the little egret that we saw earlier is a recent enough introduction, and there are others like the comma butterfly that I have first seen about Carrick and Suir, but in the last 2 or 3 years have seen it colonize the towpath to Clonmel, and the commas are very good at overwintering as well, and I often see them early in the year. So it is a great place to look for a whole selection of butterflies. There's nothing like the banded damselfly. The river from June onwards will be full of them. The larva is the female lays her egg after fertilization on stems of plants below the waterline, and the insect will then go and live in the mud and under the bottom of the plants. And if you dig them out after 1 year, they're a certain size, and after 2 years, they'll emerge as the adult insect as well. And so they're very plentiful, and the beautiful damselfly will be there as well. And how you tell the difference between the damselflies and the dragonflies, the damselflies, as in these two, will always fold their wings when they land, whereas the dragonfly will have its wings open. And this dragonfly, that's a late summer one along the towpath, is a new enough arrival as well. It's a migrant hawker, and you can identify them by the T mark on their abdomen. So they're beautiful wildlife along the entire towpath. And this bit on the Blueway, above the tide, you'll also see our reed buntings, the little grebe, the dabchick, lots of moor hens or water hens. And these were damaged a few years ago by the marauding mink, but they've made a huge comeback. And of course, the dipper loves the shallow water and the fast-flowing streams. You can dip under the rocks for caddisfly and stonefly. And as I said, all very nice to see. So you'll see something different every day. And one of our Wild About Carrick members, a fortnight ago, we're lucky to have the camera with him when this common seal stuck his head up above the bridges in Carrick, right at the head of the tide, and a very strange visitor indeed. So he's a unique, I won't say a one-off, because over time seals and porpoises have made their way up, stay around for a few days and head back. They probably are following some of the migrating fish, and certainly if you come up river and then the fish are blocked by a weir or anything like that, well, it's like manna from heaven. There's no escape. And despite us saying that there's very little trout in the river, this lovely fella picked off what must be the finest trout left. And judging by the size of the head and the size of the fish, that trout wouldn't be far shy of 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. So they're still there. It's still a beauty to be enjoyed. Every day will be different. And as I say, it's a free and open amenity to walk the riverbank. And you can do some good along the way by bashing the balsam, by kicking out stuff that shouldn't be there, and generally by recording what you see as well. All this adds to our knowledge and understanding and our safeguarding into the future. But if you really want to see what the riverbank means, go at dusk, just as darkness comes, when the swallows will go in and the bats will come out, the butterflies will go in and the moths will come out, and the sun will go down, the stars will come out, and it's a magical time on the river with the flies dropping on the water and the trout sometimes taking them. The trout will snatch at the fly and the dace will just suck it down. But it's still, it's a magical walk, even if you do it at dusk. That'll be my recommendation. But I hope you've enjoyed the introduction to the flora and fauna on the riverbank at Carrick and Suir, at the head of the tide and on the Blueway. And with that, I'll hand you back to Owen, and thank you all for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. And I think you talked about a magical time along the Blueway at dusk, and you certainly painted a magical picture in our minds about that. And I think there was a comment there earlier saying the next time, from Anne, saying the next time she drives by, she will pull up the car and go down and check it out. So the photographs were brilliant. So please, folks, put your questions in the chat, or if you like to unmute and and ask your questions directly to Brian. I might just start off, Brian, by, well, first of all, paying tribute to not only you, but the Carrick and Suir Lions Club for this work. And I think there's quite a lot came through in your presentation, and one is the ever-changing nature of the Suir and the environs, both socially and in terms of biodiversity. And this is one more change in that, the creation of the Blueway, and it opens it up for everyone to be able to enjoy, and for greater access to people, and fair play to the council for that as well. What I want to ask you first, Brian, is, and you said you grew up along the river, but were you always interested in biodiversity, or was it a slow growing thing? How did you learn so much about it?
I would say that I was always interested. I was a great fan of Eamon de Butler, and largely his introduction. I also had a great teacher in primary school, Michael Cody, who had a great interest in nature study. He put nature study on as an exam subject when we were in 4th class, and that's back in 1970. So they were some of the influences, but you can't but be influenced by the river. We crossed it every day to go to school. You crossed it to go to the shops, to go to mass. I grew up fishing, always messing around in boats. And, in those days, we did things we wouldn't do now. We hunted with dogs for rats, and, but it's a slow learning, and it's a slow realization that things are changing But it's the pace of change in recent years that have sort of made us really get involved, because you can see that our children and our grandchildren won't have the enjoyment or the freedom that we had, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you say there that you couldn't but be influenced by the river, and I think the sad thing about more modern times is that we actually don't notice what's around us, and I think maybe with COVID and there's been a certain reset. I shouldn't use that term; that's associated with conspiracy theories, but there's a certain change in people's attitudes, and we're starting to look at what we've been missing. Now, I know, of course, that people driving and that mightn't see things so much, but one great way of seeing a river, of course, is if fishermen or fisher persons now, or fishers, I think, and of course people in boats. If you're in boats, you see the river from a completely different side, and whereas you mightn't have access. So I suppose that's certainly a point, but the Blueway then opens it up for everyone. And there's a question here. Una's asking, do you think issues along the Blueway in Carrick are echoed across the rest of the country? And do we need to look at new river management and planning?
Of course. But that's a big elephant to chew. What do you mean by new river management and planning? Because I have no idea what it means. And I have been involved in the planning process in my previous career. There's no one agency responsible. You know, inland fisheries look after fisheries, national parks and wildlife service look after the wildlife, the local authorities deal with planning issues. But yes, we need to do things different. But I have said, I don't know what the role model is. Certainly, I think the biggest change needs to be that local people and local communities need to get involved. And it is even the environment is too serious to be left to environmentalists as well. You need to bring everybody with you. And I think education is going to be the key driver of the change. And, you know, a difficult question. I couldn't answer it fully. We certainly need to be all involved in improving our environment. But I sometimes there's 117 habitats. There's only one habitat. It's where you live, it's your locality. And if you don't appreciate that, you know, I know that's being pedantic, but you must know your own area.
Yeah, I think you have a point there about starting in the communities, and if the communities take an interest, I mean, we had, I think, mentioned this yesterday about the local authorities. They have so many competing roles and demands, and in terms of rivers, that one plays off another. And in the past, the environment has lost out on those. So it's up to communities to get involved and get engaged. And I certainly do see, you know, I do think there is, while there is major pressure on the environment, I think we've turned the corner in terms of environmental awareness. And now, doubtless, there's still work to be done. But I think that the Lions Club in Carrick certainly holds up an example to other communities. And if we'd have somebody like that along every stretch of every river in the country, we would be going towards having a wonderful resource.
Yeah, I think it's very important that people don't get into the blame game. You know, we're all to blame, and we can all be part of the response, but we can only manage our own response. And if we do something ourselves, do something positive, well, we're some way along the road, you know.
Yeah, and I think that idea of local communities taking ownership and doing, of course, the council can come along and do the heavy work, or maybe certain specialist work, but there's a lot to be said for, you know, why should somebody else come in and maintain your space. It's great to see local groups doing it, and I think it rubs off on the wider community when they see people being active and respect that, whereas they mightn't have the same respect for, say, something that was a national plan or that. Marika says the Blueway sounds amazing. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. Any plans to reintroduce wildlife or to help biodiversity, particularly those river plants and river creatures that have been lost or declined?
Well, we have, our own group have taken a lease of land owned by Glanbia between the bridges at Carrick, and our intention, we have engaged a qualified ecologist to guide us in reintroducing the proper natural vegetation. It's a very difficult site in that it was used for indiscriminate dumping, and we've lost a lot of species. But even for us to get involved there, it is in the SAC, and we have to work with National Parks and Wildlife Service in everything we do. It's not easy for community groups to do things when any land borders an SAC, with the amount of permissions and I won't say red tape. Bureaucracy has its place to play, but you know, certainly we're doing our bit to do something there. We've also noticed from our studies that there are, we don't think there's any swifts left nesting in Carrick and Suir at the moment. So we're conducting our survey. We've acquired swift boxes, and we'll be putting those up. And we'd like to get into trying to manage the movement of the swans from the pond onto the river, because invariably each year some get lost en route. So we're doing a bit, but it's very much local, and it's a slow process. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, and I suppose, yes, it's obviously when you get into special areas of special scientific interest, and that it becomes very technical. So it's great that you're actually doing that, and that's something we hope we'll be able to hear about in future festivals. I think that this talk is certainly having the impact that we had hoped for it, that it would encourage people to go out and visit the Blueway. And I think that when you think about what's coming over the next few years, we have the Greenway along a part of the shore from Waterford City up near to Kilmeaden, and we have there's an exciting plan to run another Greenway from Waterford up to New Ross, and there are plans to reach over as far as Rosslare, and at New Ross it joins with the Barrow and can run up along the Barrow, and eventually there's going to be quite a network of greenways and blueways. And this is great for activity, but of course it'll bring a lot of challenges in terms of the amount of traffic. And I think was it Sheila asked about
yes,
will the increasing numbers of people affect the biodiversity, and what's going to happen there?
I think it will. It's inevitable that it will. But let me go on a few things that has happened already. The people walking the Blueway from Carrick to Clonmel, in many regards, have put paid to illegal fishing. In my own instance, it has arranged for the removal of the invasive species like the Himalayan balsam and the giant hogweed. Also, immediate identification of pollution incidents that were reported quickly. And we're joining up with communities. Like Clonmel Lions are working with us now next year to do a litter pick the entire way. We have worked on cleanups, signage, and education, and that's all important. So my experience has been hugely positive in terms of a number of areas. There's no doubt as well, though, that some of the species, like the green sandpiper and I'd even say some of the otters, that they've gone to the other bank. There's no access on the other bank, you know, so they're shyer, and perhaps being nocturnal, they'll return at nighttime or whatever else. So it's inevitable that there'll be some impacts, but it's people walking on foot, and it's people using bicycles, and they will, I think overall it'll be far more positive in the long run. But it's, you know, there are people who are saying it was the introduction of the Blueway and the kayaks that caused the mortality in the crayfish, you know, possibly very true, but that may have happened anyway because the plague was already in the country, you know. So I'm positive about it. I think I'm mad about blueways and greenways because I think we're learning so much more. We're getting to appreciate outdoors, and we can stop and enjoy it, you know. So I'm happy with them.
Yeah, and it's great to see that communities are looking for them, where in the past when people were suggesting these ideas there was a kind of a mistrust, let's say, and now people see that'll be great for us. It's not just for tourists or outsiders, it's a great resource for us. I thought you did say, yeah, I think the crayfish, you know, it is inevitable, sadly, with waterways, and it's so hard to eradicate. And it has been a theme that's come up during the week about invasive species and disease. And I suppose we did talk about it with the ash and Dutch element things the other day. With the JFK, and I suppose it might be easier with them, but there is the hope that science will find some way to make them resistant or to treat these. But again, things are ever changing. But I was amazed that, I mean, I did a lot of inland fishing in my youth, and I was amazed at the all these fish I never heard of, or the cucumber fish, the flounder being that far inland, and the shad. Really interesting, and it's really interesting estuarine tidal ecosystem there that you have. So it's very special. I think as well, I mean, you touched on, you know, some of my absolute favorite animals. The otter has to be, you know, absolutely stunning. I don't think I've actually watched an otter at Houston Station in Dublin in the Liffey, where the whole city went by and nobody was looking. I was very early for a train and was looking over the wall, so you can see them. It's rare. You have to be up very early in the morning. I've seen them, and they really are a treat, particularly when there's a family of them. So it's wonderful to know that they're well at the moment there. And then another creature that's a real, I think it's just absolutely stunning, is both the damselfly and the dragonflies. And they're one of the things about a summer walk by the water is to be accompanied by and watch them flit over the water and land and on plants. So as one, I was particularly delighted to see those photographs. They're stunning photographs, and I think you've converted everyone, and there'll be a throng of people. You'll be complaining about the number of people coming after this. So we have lots of thanks. Stephen Norton says a fantastic presentation on your conservation work and inspiration to do something to go do is an inspiration to go and do something to help ourselves. And then we have a thank you, very informative walk. So I think I'm absolutely delighted, Brian, that you were able to join us. I know you wanted to be able to guide people along the river, and next year I'm sure you will be. And I know that you're going to help us out on some of our school's work. We're going to work together during the year, and and it's great that we can all work in partnership and promote our natural heritage. So thank you once again, Brian, and we salute you and the Carrick and Suir Lions Club, and we have the whole of the summer now to make sure that we get to Carrick and Suir and do the Blue Way. So thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm now going to be joined by Enrica, who now firstly I need to change here, and we're going to see our TYs from Gael Closh and Clor in Ennis, County Clare, with their message about the environment.
We spoke to the firsters and the CSE teacher to encourage sustainability. We put down to work the days for 911 and we also rewarded them with all the alternatives to plastics, such as reusable waste boxes, reusable water bottles, and biodegradable materials. The results were amazing.
Okay, Tia, when Ragnar interviewed a Shakachi Kevin, Concanto Horse Club, we led past up gave through Sprague, Shinwood, Sarong, OSPF, and the CSP to look at where does plastic come from, the amount of oil that is left in the world, and what they as individuals can do to reduce their use of plastic, so that therefore we can reduce the length of time that oil has left. So, someone will order a granular kitty would shocking plastic because she's an usage. So, Kelly Buskalo Ma and the baby usage, shocking plastic fork, the usage and cheap keens in that bamboo, no one keen hain over the shakabalia, and the granular popper mala, I'll give you some particular French ties or kitty wood in New Hampshire, I thought taxis will adopt on the connoisseur of paper match.
No, I'm not sure. Did that run over twice? Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, Enrica, firstly, can you tell us what
the sound is still playing there on the video?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Has it stopped yet?
Nope.
Okay.
I can mute you if it's easier. Oh yeah, there we go.
How are we now?
Yeah, all good on.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a bug in the software we're using that it has its own mind. So Enrica, you might tell us what the schools have been doing in the festival.
Yeah, exactly. So we had the pleasure this week to have more than 4,000 students engaging with experts on biodiversity on our doorstep and on sustainability activities. Talking about young people and activities, we just would like to remind you that we have lots of activities and guides on our website. I can share with you the link on the chat if you might be interested with your little ones. And yeah, exactly what Owen is showing right now. So thank you, Owen, for that.
These are, unfortunately, these are the activities from yesterday, but there's loads of activities available.
Exactly, loads of different activities and guides about biodiversity. There are some from sea rescue as well, or Wild About Wildlife. So there are literally tons of activities and guides. So have fun. And about tomorrow, have you noticed no more zone in your community? Do you wonder why they are there and where they come from? We have the pleasure tomorrow to have with us Yvonne Grace, horticulture lecturer from Waterford Institute of Technology, speaks about how to create these zones and the importance of promoting biodiversity in our local community. All the events could be found, of course, at on our website, so at livingearth.ie. And last but not least, don't forget to share with us your pictures, because Owen, we have some prizes tomorrow as well, and the theme of today is
I'm looking for it.
Yeah, is waterways.
Waterways is the
Waterways,
theme,
yeah.
yes. We might as well, we don't need a slide to tell you that. So the theme is waterways, and we will hopefully see you then. And remember, tomorrow is International Day for Biological Diversity, and we hope to that you will all be able to join us again. We had an introduction to the idea of letting nature take its course and tomorrow we'll be looking at it again with Yvonne Grace and Sean Keane, and Sean will be on hand to answer your questions, and Yvonne will be doing the presentation. So that's something to look forward to. Once again, thank you to Brian and all the Carrick crowd, and thank you to all the CalMAS team for putting this together, and most of all, thank you all for being part of this festival. And we hope to that you'll be back with us over the weekend. There's lots of stuff on the website that you can look at, and that you can, as Enrique said, there are lots of guides that will help you if you're out and about and you want to know what you're looking at. There's guides to flowers, to trees, to butterflies, to bees, and to birds. So please use those and enjoy yourself when you're out and about, and hopefully we'll see you back over the weekend. So good evening, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Owen. I only got in at the very